And there's always a potential for dying. This is like a loaded grenade right now. That was terrifying. Since this Touareg is taking up the lift, I think what I'm gonna do is just put it right here and pull the motor out of that only on jack stands. Okay, I finished draining all of the fluids in the front end, which is power steering, transmission fluid, coolant. So now we can fully remove the front end. Okay, I think we're free to go. This guy over here, okay, perfect. This thing is heavy. There's probably still a bunch of coolant and fluids left in here, but that's a problem for another day. Out of the way. No idea what I'm gonna do with it, but probably just gonna end up tossing it back in the car when somebody takes it to the scrapyard. What? Did I say scrapyard? No, I did not. Of course not. No. Your legacy will live on with this engine, so thank you for that. We do have to disconnect the fuel lines up front here. There we go. There's a ground here somewhere. Unhook the gear selector cable. Come on. There we go. A 10mm open end wrench. So something really cool about these brakes. They're 17Z Brembo brakes, 6 pistons that come on Touaregs, Q7s, Cayennes. The bolt pattern in the back where the caliper mounts to the upright is the same as it is on many other Audis and Volkswagens, such as the B5S4, which I have. People use these as a brake upgrade for those cars, including me. I have these on my B5S4, which look great. They're a massive upgrade from the stock brakes. And because of that, these actually have a good amount of value. Probably get around 300 bucks for them. Quick reminder, I got this thing for 500 bucks, so I could make a decent chunk of that money back with these. Not to mention that I'm gonna keep these wheels and then put on some crappy spares and stuff back on this thing to be able to roll it out of here. When I did the engine pull on the Touareg that's on the left, I left the struts in place because I did not want to mess with taking off the brake calipers and having brake fluid dripping. Because this car is going to a junkyard, I could just snip the brake lines and I could just have all this out as one assembly, because like I mentioned, I do plan on keeping some spare parts, including these struts, assuming that they don't have leak or blown bags, including the brake calipers, including the axles. So it would be pretty useful if I just pulled all this out as one piece. And if I do that, all I have to remove is the 3 bolts up top, snip the air suspension line, speed sensor, drain all the brake fluid out using this fluid extractor. I just hook it up to the bleeder valve, create a vacuum, and loosen the bleeder valve up. Something I definitely messed up when working on that Touareg, I just did not take off the wheels. Somebody actually mentioned that in the comments, and you're absolutely right, I should have done that. That would have made my life significantly easier. For some reason I was just too lazy, and I don't know why I didn't do it. But you definitely want to remove the wheels because first of all, that gives you much easier access to the heater core lines right here, as well as it's much easier to get rid of the axles and they're not going to get caught on the tire like they did in my case, as well as the tie rod that was getting caught on the tire as well when I was lifting the car off of the subframe. So take off your wheels, people. Don't be lazy. Don't do what I did. So now I am going to disconnect these heater core lines. There we go. So without further ado, I think I'm free to remove the 3 top bolts holding the strut from the engine bay, and at that point we're almost there. Unfortunately on this platform, that is the Cayennes, Q7s and Touaregs, the 3 top strut bolts are pretty hard to access except for one of them. This guy is as good as it gets. For some reason that was really hard to say. The other 2 are right there, which is not so bad on the coolant tank side, and then the 3rd is over there. Again, not as bad on passenger side as it is on the driver's side. So we got this one out. There's one more right here, also not terrible. The last one, almost impossible to see. There he is, right there. With these wobble extensions, I think it might be pretty doable. Okay. And now, as you can see, the struts are quite free. There is one little bracket under a car that I feel like most people would forget about because it seems to serve no purpose. I have no idea why it's there. If you go right here, you will see this little cross brace. It is super thin metal. Literally, you can tell that it has no structural purpose whatsoever. Luckily, it's super easy to remove. It's just one 10mm nut on each side. I think we finally got into the point where I need to make sure I have this engine hoist available. So So I think my plan is to use the actual hoist to hold the motor up as I undo all of the bolts that hold it out to the car. And then once everything's unbolted, we're going to slowly lower it onto the legs of the hoist and have the subframe sitting on that as we pull it all out. Is it going to work? I have no idea, but we're going to give it a shot. I guess we just got to hope that it holds. The concoction that I came up with, we were basically just using these bolts. I know they're not even threaded in all the way, which is fine. I think it should be fine. All we got to do is just lower this onto the legs of the hoist, so it's not going to be holding this up for a long time or anything like that. So I think we should be okay. Definitely not the most secure idea, but it's the best I can do at the moment without having to run to a hardware store or something like that. There are like 4 major areas that you need to work in. Up in the engine bay is pretty simple. All of the electrical stuff is right here and pretty easy to access. You have one piece of the harness going over to the ECU right here, which is housed right there. It's got a ground and another connector right here. The other side connects into the fuse box, also pulls out. There's only like 4 connectors on that. There is a ground that goes right here on the frame rail. There's the starter cable going into the jumping point. Power steering, you only have to disconnect this hose over here from the reservoir. That goes straight to the pump. You have AC lines. They can be disconnected in a multitude of ways. You can go straight from the compressor, which is what I did with this one. And then the other line is disconnected at the condenser. And you do have the transmission cooler lines right here, which are held in by a 10mm bolt. And then of course the fuel lines and the coolant lines right here. There's 2 that do go straight to the motor and need to be unplugged from the reservoir. Now under the car, there's not a whole lot. You need to make sure to unhook the harnesses going into the transfer case. There are 3 harnesses going into the transmission. You can sort of see them right there. They're a bit of a pain to unclip, but it is possible. You have to unbolt these 2 brackets for the exhaust on both sides. You have to undo the exhaust clamps for the downpipes to slide out of them. And for the drive shaft, you have to undo one of these sides. So as you can see, there are 6 bolts total. You only have to undo 3 of them. You can pick your own side. You can have the bushing come out with the motor, or you can have it stay in and undo these bolts instead. And then depending on methodology that you use for the suspension, you can either undo the struts up top and then deal with the brake fluid, or you can disconnect axles and tie rod and lower ball joint and have the subframe separate from that. And then lastly, we have this cross brace, which mounts the transfer case to it, as well as the actual subframe. I'm going to start by partially unbolting the subframe bolts. They are all 21mm. This exact bolt is the one that I had to break off on that car. I still have to drill that out because the threaded part of the bolt is still stuck inside the frame. I'm also going to use a jack to support the back of the drivetrain because this is an extremely long transmission and the back of this is not going to be supported. And as you can see, the lowest point, this cross brace, does not really reach the legs of the engine hoist. The cross brace is held in by 16mm bolts. Besides the 21mm subframe bolt on each side, there's another 21mm bolt that holds the engine bracket. If you're wondering why am I sitting in an awkward position like this, it's because I'm afraid of being under the car while it's just sitting on the 2 jack stands. With the motor and subframe dropping, there's going to be a lot of weight shifting, and there's always a potential for dying. Hence, worst case, I maybe lose an arm. As you can see on this pulled motor, The front subframe bolt has to go through all of this and then into the frame rail, while the engine bracket bolt is shorter. It being shorter means that it's less likely to get seized up and crooked and, you know, have a hard time getting out. So I'm going to remove this one on both sides, and then lastly I'm going to do this. And hopefully we have better luck than last time, because this is what happened last time with this guy. As you can see, it snapped off right here, and all the whole threaded part is still in the car. We're going to get a lot of movement now. I feel like there should be a little less play than that. That was terrifying. So when I'm trying to lower them with the hoist holding up only the motor and not the subframe just drops down and the motor stays up. If I had multiple jacks, I would have jacked this up, took off the bolt, and then lowered it with the jack. But my only jack is being held up over there by the transfer case in the back. I have an idea. Now, yes, I know these jacks are very unsafe, but it is safer than letting this thing drop down on its own. Okay, so I can see it taking off the load off the bolt. This is like a loaded grenade right now. My heart rate is probably like 140 right now. Oh, I'm actually curious. What did I tell you? 122. The scissor jack idea actually worked out quite well. Now the question is, would this actually slide out, or is it caught on a bunch of stuff? You can see the brake rotors are sitting on the ground, but hopefully we can just drag them the way they are. Okay, so now the strut is getting caught on whatever this stuff is. Looks like we have some sort of a AC guy over here, and these lines are in our way. And then this guy also can be bent out of the way. I think we're good. Ugh. Woo! This actually took me a pretty small amount of time. In comparison to this, doing this on the lift took me longer, but I also was trying to figure things out as I go. Now that I'm more familiar, this didn't take that long. It was scary at times, but if you have like at least 2 jacks, I think you should be okay. 5.5 hours today, and then I think a couple of days ago I put in maybe an hour. So 6.5 hours total. Considering the fact that the headlights and bumper were already gone, the windshield wiper arms were gone. That saved me some time because they can be a pain. And that's it. I'm impressed, 6.5 hours. Because when I was working on this, first I had issues with the axle nuts not coming off. I spent a few hours on that, and then yeah, the windshield wiper arms did not want to slide out, which also took some time, but it is definitely doable. If you're thinking about pulling your motor and you're hesitant because you don't have a lift, I think you should just go for it. In reality, all I needed was 2 jack stands to hold the front end up, an engine hoist, and then maybe 1 or 2 jacks would be good. Next steps would be so issue number 1 is that this subframe is significantly more rusty than this one. So I think I'm going to try and get the motor and transmission off of the subframe, swap the subframes, go over the suspension, see which parts off of which car I want to use, and then I'm also going to do the camshaft chains on this motor. Probably just going to use the parts off of my old motor because I know those tensioners and chains are pretty new. Going to throw those on here, check the timing belt situation, and going to put it back in, which I'm positive is going to take a lot more time because it is going to be pretty hard to line everything up with the body. Not to mention the fact that I have to take off that broken bolt and drill it out of the frame. I've been doing my best to be pretty consistent with my videos. I'm spending a decent amount of time with editing, and I'm really trying. I'm really trying to make YouTube work. Subscriptions would really help me out in terms of getting monetized, in terms of feeling better about my channel, and not feeling like I'm wasting my time. And if there's any pointers you have for other viewers and myself about what I could have done better, please put them in the comments. I think that would be very useful. I'm not a know-it-all by any means. So I will happily receive feedback and tips, especially on how to put this thing back in. I'm gonna need that. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this content. If you did, and if you'd like to see more, please subscribe. Thank you, and see you next time.